Hey, this is Gregor. A few friends asked me to share what the process is looking like when I create something as a developer. So I thought I would create a little library from scratch and just make a video of it so others can benefit from it as well. So this is what I'm going to do. My idea for the little library is I want to have a library that generates a simple string that is random but still human readable. And my idea is to have something which gives me a random adjective like clever, and then an animal like fox, and then a number between like 10 and 99. So I would have like clever fox 88. So for an app like Try Hoodie, or like for example Twitter, when people have to choose a username or even a password, instead of creating like having an empty field, it would be nice to kind of preset it with something that people can just click the button and move on. And how do I start? Well, the biggest problem is the name. Like naming is one of the biggest problems actually in software development. So my idea is that I will call this thing let's say Funky Sloth 42, which could as well be a result of the library, but I think it's funny, and if I don't have a better idea, I just use something funny. And funky is my favorite adjective, sloth is my favorite animal, and 42, of course, is just very nerdy and a homage to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I created a new folder, and in this folder, the first thing that I will do is to create a README. So I have my editor called Atom, and I create a new file, readme.md. And the readme.md file is kind of like a manual. So before I even touch any code, I just write the manual for my library as if it would already exist, which also helps me to reflect on what I actually want to do. So the title, by convention, my own convention, is just the same as the library name. And then I follow it with like a one-sentence summary of what it is. So let's say like generates random string out of adjective, animal, and a number. And then I could say the usage. So like how would people use my library? So I would say generate string will be whatever my library will expose as functionality. And then I can just console log generate string, and it will return like clever fox 11, and then just to show that every time I call it there will be another string, I could say hungry B99. Okay. Then every open source project needs a license, and I'm a fan of the Apache 2.0 license, so I will just use that. Okay, next up, I will actually create a repository. A quick walkthrough of the tools that I will use. For one, I will use GitHub, which is where we host our open source code and where most open source communities these days collaborate. I use Hub, which is a simple command line tool that I can use in a terminal, which lets me use functionality of github.com right from my terminal. I will build this library in Node.js, which is like JavaScript runtime, which runs on the server. And I will use npm, which is the package manager for Node.js. All right. So the first thing that I do is to create a repository, which is as simple as hap create. It will use my username and the name of the folder as the repository name. And then I can add a description. And I will simply add the same description that I have here for it. Oops. Okay. So first I have to git init it. So I have a like git in this folder now. So if I do git status, I can see there is a new file which has been untracked. And now I can run hap create, and it creates my repository and updates my origin and everything I need. Okay. So now I can git add the README file, and I can git commit it with a commit message which describes what I've done, and then I can git push.u origin master. Okay, and if I do git browse, then I will see my newly created repository, funkyslov42, and my README. But right now there's only the README file, so obviously nothing works. Okay, so let's get it started. First thing is I use npm to initialize, to kind of set up the Node.js project. It will generate a package JSON which has some meta information, and the first thing that I will do is I will adjust a few things. So for example, I will adjust the description, and the license is Apache to 0, and I can put in my name. Okay, and I think the rest is good for now. Now, npm is pretty cool. It's like Lego, only that everything is free, and if you know the name of the packages that you need, it will save you a lot of time. And funny enough, I can simply install packages with npm install, and with --save, the packages get added to my package JSON. So when someone else checks it out, they will get the same packages installed. And in fact, there are the packages, adjectives, and animals, and even random number in range, which is funny enough everything I need, and I just need to put them together. So that's why JavaScript is fun. A lot of stuff is already done. Okay, now that I have that, I want to write tests. And for tests, I will install a few more things. This time, I install them as development dependencies, which will be tap for testing. NYC is a library for test coverage. And standard, which is a linter, pre-configured linter, so that I make sure that the syntax is correct. And if other people want to contribute to the project, that kind of the same syntax and conventions are enforced by it. So that is pretty cool. Okay, while this is installing, I can create a new file and just call it test.js. Let's say I have a test folder and call it test. Okay, just test index.js. So here I require tab, which gives me this test API, and with test I can now kind of describe what I want. So first I can do a so-called smoke test, which just makes sure that just executing my library basically works. And what I want is oops, I can do the generate random string, which will require my library. So I have to go one folder up, and it will be the index.js file there. And when I execute it, I want the type of string to be a string. Okay, and this is my first test. So meanwhile, everything here should be installed. And if I run node test, did I do something wrong? Oh, oops, I'm in the wrong project. Okay, let's try this again. Test index.js, and just paste it in here. And now I should be able to run node test index.js. And it already complains because the index file does not yet exist. So I just created and this model will export a function called generate random string. Oops. And I define it down here. And for now, I just return an empty string. Now, if I call it, then my smoke test already works. Obviously, it's like this one test passes, but it's not good enough. You probably should also check that the string should be longer than just one should not be empty pretty much. So I check that the length is longer than 0 characters. So now it will fail. I go back and I now just say blah blah, and it will pass again. And maybe the last test that I could add is it should contain numbers. I use a regular expression for that. It should end with exactly 2 numbers. So this means there's maybe, let's say I want to have, a dash, then 2 numbers, and then the end of string. Okay, I don't need that actually. So now it will fail again. And if we now say like just the name of our repository, that should now pass. Okay. So now we have our tests. Now in our package.json, we should define how our tests are executed. So in our case, I would say tab with coverage on test index.js. So now if I do npm test, I will see that my tests are executed, and also tells me if all my code that I have in index.js, the actual library, is covered by my tests, which looks good so far, but also so far it doesn't do anything, right? There is just one line of code. Okay, what's next? Let's say, oh yeah, standard, like the enforcing of the syntax. For example, standard does not allow semicolons, although this is perfectly valid JavaScript syntax. But I just want to avoid that, some lines would have semicolons and others won't. It should all look as if one person would have worked on it. Once, it will have more contributors. So I have standard. So after my actual tests are run, post-test, I want to run standard. And that's as easy as it. It's already pre-configured. It knows exactly what to do without me telling it to. So if I run npm test now, it will run my tests, and afterwards it will run standard, and it will tell me that in line 10 of index.js there is an extra semicolon. So I have to get rid of it. I run it again, and now it's all passing. Okay. Okay. Now let's actually make it real. I have adjectives. I have animals. And I have this other package, random number in range. So I would just call this random number. Now, I just guessing right now how this works. So I guess when I call adjective as a function, I just get the random adjective, I get a random animal, and then I get a random number between 10 and 99. Let's see how that works. npm test. Oh, now something is falling apart. Adjectives is not a function. Okay. So now I think I would actually look up how it works. So I go to the package page of adjectives, and here it already tells me, oh, it's just an array. Okay, so I will define a small helper method here and call it random animal. And here I now want to return a random item of animals. So the way this could work is return animals, add an index, which will now be a random number. Oops. Which, lucky enough, we already have a library for. Starting at 0, because indices already start at 0, until animals length, which is the amount of animals we have in our list, -1, because it starts at 0. So it doesn't end at the length, it actually ends at animals length -1. And now I replace this with random animal. Okay, something is still broken. Adjectives is not a function. Oh. I did it the wrong way around. Oops. Okay, so let's see if animals actually works as expected. Expects a string, but it gets an object. Oh, I know. Because I return an array and I totally forgot. I want to join these 3 parts with dashes. All right, that looks good. Let's see how it works. I can directly open a REPL for Node, and I can require my own library like this. Generate random string. Fragile snail 49, animated badger 13, flipping goat 28. So that is pretty cool. Okay, so I have my library and I have tests for it, which are pretty basic, but that's okay. I do a git status and see there are like weird things here. So, oh yeah. Well, we can start by creating a file called gitignore, which is just a simple text file with a list of things and like folders and files that we do not want to commit to our project, which is nyc output. We will have coverage in a moment and also node modules. And I think this should be it. So if I do git status now, then nyc output will disappear and we will have the gitignore. I also want to add the license file because I'm a good open source citizen, and I just copy it from another folder of mine. CP is copy. I made a library called before. Oops, where am I? Oh, okay. Copy from projects before after hook, and there is a license file with an S because British English for life. And I just copy it into my current folder. So now it's here, I can just cat it, and it's just like the original Apache license version 2.0 with copyright to me. Okay, and now, oh yeah, coverage, test coverage. I want to automatically report test coverage later, so I add another tool which is called coveralls. It's a service. I can open it meanwhile. Let's see, I have to sign in first. So coveralls can prevent new code to be contributed to my library or any other library I created unless it keeps 100% code coverage, which is exactly what I want. So the first thing I will do is I will add the repository. And first I have to synchronize the repositories. This will take a moment. Okay. Meanwhile, I can commit my chore files here. For example, I can add gitignore, and I get committed with the commit message doesn't matter really, but I follow a certain kind of convention, and I do the same with the license file. Okay, that is okay. So I can push these things already to GitHub, and now when I reload it, there will now be the gitignore file and the license file, and because the license file is here and it follows a certain syntax, Apache 2.0 is appearing right here. So it's the first kind of signaling that I want to do to others that this is a good kind of library. This is still syncing, but I think this is taking longer than it should. Probably it's already there. Yeah. Okay, so I just enable it here, and I configure it so I don't want it to leave comments, and the threshold for failure is 100%. So just in case someone adds new code and it's not covered by tests, GitHub will prevent me from merging it. Okay. Next up, I want to set up my automated tests. And while doing this, I will also set up automated releases. And there is a fantastic tool for it called Semantic Release, which also comes with its own CLI tool. So all I have to do is call Semantic Release CLI Setup. It will ask me a few things, like my registry, what's my npm username. I will say gr2amp, that's my private username, my private GitHub username. It reads the password actually from my keychain. Now I need two authorization. I have to look this up. 1 second. 633368. And I will use the normal Travis CI. Yeah, I want to create a Travis YAML file. Okay. So this thing did a few things. It installed semantic release. It added a semantic release task. It changed the version because the version will be set dynamically now. It changed the Git URL so that semantic release can work with it. And it also created this Travis file, which configures my continuous integration, meaning the tests that are run automatically on the cloud whenever someone, for example, starts a pull request for my code. And besides the npm semantic release task, I also want to run coverage. And coverage I have still defined here, which, oh my, I hope I got this right. Let me actually copy this. I looked this up from my other project that I just worked on. I think I had used it here as well. No, 1 second. So yeah, I don't know everything by heart. I have to look it up, and copy and paste is the best. This is the one that I want. So this is using this NYC tool that I mentioned quickly in the beginning, and coveralls, which we just installed here. So it kind of runs the coverage locally and then sends it to the coveralls project. And this is run after all tests passed. Okay, so that is fine. Now, this time I don't want to push it to master directly. Instead, I create a new branch called initial release so I can start a pull request. Okay, I hope this will all work fine. So first I will add the Travis file. Oops, git add Travis, Travis initial version. I will add the package JSON file. Initial version. I add all my tests. Initial version, and I add my initial implementation. And this is the only part where actually the commit message is significant, because semantic release will turn this feature prefix and calculates that it will bump the version number accordingly. For example, for a feature, it bumps the feature version number, which is the second. In this case, because there is no version yet, it will just release the first version automatically. Okay, so I push this local branch to GitHub now. And now I will start a pull request. just call it initial version, and I will directly open it in my browser. So I could have done this with github.com. It would take me a little bit more time. So this is faster. So what you can see here is the commits that I just did and all the changes that I've done. Here's my test file, my package.json file, my implementation. And here I see that this is where my continuous tests are running right now. So if I open it, and I hope that it will be picked up soon, it now runs my tests in different versions of Node.js, in version 4, version 6, and version 7, so that we make sure that it doesn't break. And what it does is it clones the files from GitHub. Then it runs npm install just like I did locally, and based on the package.json, it will get the same dependencies that I have. Like here, for example, adjectives, animals, coveralls, and so on. They also have sub-dependencies, so it's an entire tree. After the install, it runs the test just like locally. And it all works fine. Here it runs semantic release, but it will tell me this is not the main branch, so I will not release it from here. And it runs coverage. So now, actually, when I reload it, I hope, yeah. So now it tells me I have 100% coverage. This will also give me this really cool badge, which is another signaling that I would like to add to my repository. So I would like to add certain kind of badges so people will see it on first sight. Just as comparison, this other library that I built has these badges right here, 2 of which don't work right now, but it doesn't matter. But it shows me that my automated tests are passing, the coverage is 100%, and it should show that my dependencies up to date, both the production dependencies and the developer dependencies. So we just go to this other project and just copy the source code for these images, for these badges, right into my own README. And then, of course, replace the before-after hook, which is the name of the other library, with funky sloth 42. Okay, so now I can also commit these badges, and now all my tests are green here, so I can merge it now. I can even configure GitHub to enforce this kind of workflow, which is great. I mean, for me alone, it's not a big deal, but once I will start work with others, I want to, for example, avoid that people automatically break something in master, or like to override something in master. So I disable so-called force pushes. And I require status, where I can select both coveralls and Travis CI, which means I have to enter my password. Which means GitHub will not allow me to merge this pull request until all these conditions are met. So in this case, it's okay, and I can merge it from here, or I can just merge it locally. So I check out my master branch, and I git merge the other branch, and I push it, and this will close this pull request automatically. I can delete the branch on GitHub. And now I've also, you see the badges here, which don't show much yet because it's still not being released. But when I go to my Travis, I can see this is the current run that is happening. And that is actually fun to watch. So now it's been merged to the so-called master branch. So everything that is merged to the master branch will be released automatically using semantic release, which is just extremely helpful for me because I have very little overhead with when, for example, someone else comes in and wants to build a feature or fix a bug. I can just merge it and a new version gets released automatically, and I don't have any kind of manual labor with it. So I can watch this now. It's running my tests. All tests passed. And now semantic release is waiting for the other tests to finish. As you've seen before, this is tested simultaneously in node 4, 6, and 7. So now it says all 3 jobs have been passed. And here it says it just released it to NPM. Cool. So when I go to npm.js and go to funky slough 42, then okay, these 2 pages still don't work, and I think this one is, oh, now it is. So it's all green, 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 which is nice signaling. I don't know why this one is gray, so I think it's just cached, which is fine, but my library is now here and it's been released and the work is nearly done. So the last thing that I want to do is kind of one downside from having so many packages and relying on other packages is that, actually that's the wrong repository, is that I have to keep my own package up to date. Like as there are new releases, for example, animals, maybe new animals are added or like typos are fixed or something, I have to keep my package up to date as well. But luckily there is a really cool service for this called Greenkeeper, and I can directly use the GitHub integration of Greenkeeper for it, which I've already set up for my account. And I can simply search for it here. There it is. I can save it. And now Greenkeeper will send me pull requests automatically every time a dependency of mine updates. And because it's a pull request, once I merge it, a new version is released automatically. So I really have as little maintenance overhead as possible with this. And at the same time, because it's 100% test coverage, it has tests. It's also very welcoming and signals to both people who want to use it and to contributors that this is like a very well maintained library. All right, I think that's all, and I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, find me on Twitter.